Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Jeff Ayton and I'm your MC today to guide you through this the proceedings. I welcome you to Peppermint Bay Hotel in Woodbridge, and for those who've travelled, I welcome you to Lutruwita, Tasmania and Nipaluna, Hobart, and for all I acknowledge the First Nations people, the original owners and custodians of this land, sea and sky, where we gather and pay our respects to elders past and present and any who may identify as First Nations people here with us today. It is a privilege to be asked to guide you through today's celebration of life well lived of Professor Dennis Robert Pashen, who tragically died on the 23rd of November 2023 while sailing with his beloved Vicky and dog Toby at Kingfisher Beach, South Bruny Island, at the southern end of this beautiful D'Entrecasteaux Channel and a beautiful, much-loved waterway. We gather and pause to pay our respects to Dennis and provide support and comfort to his wife Vicky, Sheedy, and the Sheedy family, Dan, Katie and Fred, Kerry and sons who are with us today. Our thoughts are also with Dennis's daughter, Anna Pashen, who's unable to be here today. Also Helen Smeaton and the Gutteridge clan are not able to travel south as they celebrate their youngest son's, Ollie's 21st birthday today. Our thoughts are with distant relatives and friends. An enormous character was Dennis Pashen, a rogue. He filled the room. Some of you will know aspects of Dennis's life, but not all. Some will be surprised. The clothing we wear and the infamous shirts is Dennis. We hope to share a little more today, and I'm humbled by what I know and continue to learn about my friend and colleague. His love of life, generosity and breadth of contribution expands from here in Middleton, Woodbridge and his Channel area across Tasmania, especially the West Coast and St Helens, Queenstown, notably his contribution in Queensland, Ingham, Mount Isa, the Burnett, Kingaroy, Doomadgee, and internationally amongst rural and remote medicine, rural generalists, physician assistants, always advocating for rural and remote health and their communities. Professor Pashen, MBBS, Master of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, Honorary Doctor of Medicine, James Cook University, Fellow of the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine, Fellow of the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, Professor Adjunct JC James Cook University School of Medicine and Dentistry, Clinical Professor, University of Tasmania School of Medicine, Rural Generalist, Visiting Medical Officer, Medical Superintendent with advanced practice in obstetrics, emergency medicine, public health, Indigenous health and medical education. He was Chair of the Australian and New Zealand Physicians Assistance Council and patron to the Australian Paramedics Practitioners College and recipient of the Australian Centenary Medal. He was a loving husband, father, stepfather, grandfather, friend, neighbour, dog lover, guitarist, collector, doctor, mentor, colleague, teacher, academic, professor, leader, president and past president, board member and patron. Dennis was a most generous friend and colleague. a wonderful support to myself, my wife Jen, and our family here in Hobart. Jen and I were privileged to be the only guests and the witnesses at the wedding of Dennis and Vicky at the private Hotel Islington in South Hobart. A most memorable day, evening, overnight stay and breakfast before they headed off to Pump House Point on their second night as a married couple. We did not envisage being here today. The world is poorer without him. Dennis was born in Cloncurry, Queensland, of which he was proud. He went to Charters Towers, Thornborough boarding school at the age of 4, supported and educated through Brisbane Boys College and the University of Queensland Medical School. As an only child, in later life, he cared for his mother Cleo when she moved to Middleton, and we all grew fond of her, of the homely welcoming dinners and good times. Some of you celebrated Cleo's 90th birthday here at Peppermint Bay, at the same hotel, and Dennis and Vicky mourned her death during COVID times and restrictions in 2020. On moving to Tasmania, Dennis asked me where he should work in his retirement. Typical, in his retirement. It's always good to ask someone on the ground moving into a state, and being involved in rural and remote health, I was aware of some of the challenges of training and sustaining rural generalists in Tasmanian communities. So I suggested Queenstown. On the West Coast was in need and would most deserve his medical care and contribution to health in the West Coast communities. Dennis committed his retirement years to ensure safe and quality healthcare in rural and remote Tasmania and mentoring the next generation of students, registrars and rural generalists and fellows, some of who are here today, and will no doubt continue his inspirational work. Vicky has requested today be a celebration of life. Step in and out as needs be, spend time on the grass or by the water, mingle among friends and colleagues, enjoy the music and photo tributes and this beautiful venue, catch up, laugh, support and reflect. Just a bit of housekeeping. If we could just silence your phones. Toilets are just out this door to the left and available as you see them as you walk towards the door. And food and bar will be ending at 3 p.m, and you're welcome to go to the public bar after that or wherever you would like to go, but the covered food will end at 3 and drinks will end at 3. Please visit the desk over on the left and leave your name and email address in the little red book. You're also invited to write a memory letter to Dennis today or when you get home. Paper and envelopes are provided next to the little red book. Feel free to leave your thoughts if you can't say them today or send them through to Vicky. We'll have a short break after the first music tributes and then provide opportunity for those who wish to fill in the blanks in a very full life and share more of the Dennis they knew and loved. Melissa Sweet, a good friend of Dennis and journalist with Croaky, is with us today. She'll be taking some photos and seeking your reflections. Please feel free to decline or participate as you wish. I'll now call upon Dr. Lewis Peachy, a Girramay man from North Queensland, rural generalist anaesthetist at Atherton Hospital and fellow of the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine, one of the first Indigenous Australian doctors and first president, one of the founders of the Australian Indigenous Doctors Association. Dennis's good friend and colleague, to pay his tribute to Professor Dennis Pashen.
Yes, so I'm Lewis Peachy for some people who won't know who I am, and I've known Dennis for a while. Thank you, brother, for that introduction. Thank you for the acknowledgement for the literary to people. Just to give you some background as an Aboriginal man, just to explain something. Acknowledgements and welcomes to country are simply an invitation to share our history. The colonial project was heavily influenced by Locke's second treatise on government and the King James version of Genesis 1:26, which focused on taking dominion over the land. And this is in contrast to the relationship that my people have with the land, which is to have a relationship with it. In our traditions, there were only basically two groups of people who were family and others. If a young man was to migrate to another people's country, when he went to that new country, he would seek adoption by a local elder, and that relationship with that elder would then inform all other relationships with everybody else in his new clan. Dennis is the uncle of my two daughters. They don't differentiate between the uncleness of Dennis and the uncleness of their Uncle Ed, who's the firstborn of my parents. If someone was to ask my daughters, how is Dennis their uncle, I would expect that the answer would be something like a big roll of the eyes, and during an expired sigh would say something like, because he's Dad's brother. And that would be followed by a look that would tell you that that conversation has now ended and it's time to move on. When my wife would visit me at Micra and bring our daughters along, particularly my youngest, the first thing that she'd do is she'd immediately go to Dennis's office, and it mattered not to her whether or not he was talking to somebody in an interview, having a conversation, discussing business, typing on the computer, or in the middle of the teleconference. She would then jump up onto his lap, fully confident of the fact that he belonged to her and she belonged to him. One thing that I am confident of is that as the news of brothers passing went through the Indigenous community around this country, that there was a collective cry out of the souls of Indigenous folk. The souls of black folk in this country called out to our ancestors to just keep an eye out for Brother Dennis, and in the next world be there to look after him, because he belongs to us. He's one of us. And for us, Dennis really was the epitome of somebody who's crossed over. A lot of us would refer to Dennis, the term amongst my people would be white skin for nothing. Sorry, I'm now trying to read my notes through tears, which is less effective. Thank you. And look, those of us who knew Dennis well, we all know that he would make fairly irregular faux pas. And a lot of these faux pas would relate in one way or another to a lapse in concentration. Dennis's neurodiversity ought not be a surprise to anybody in this room. I remember one day Brother was telling me that during one of his father's tours of duty in Vietnam, he started to accumulate a supply of amphetamines at home. So the American soldiers were using amphetamines to stay awake whilst on patrol. And one of the medical officers had told Dennis's dad that amphetamines were useful in the weight loss. So as a regimental SAR major was able to do, these supplies which he'd acquired from the American quartermaster got sent home in parcels and bypassed customs and were sitting in a cupboard at home. When Dennis was in the latter part of medical school, he spotted these and he knew that some people were using them as study aids. And his brother's telling me the story. He said, because there's all the stories about how the amphetamines, addle your brain, and it's not true. When I took those things, I had perfect concentration on exactly what was going on. And he was so happy about this. And I said to him, so brother, you do understand, don't you, that you've just described now a diagnostic trial for ADHD? Oh, yeah. The getting mad at Dennis for losing concentration, I think, is something like getting cranky at a Labrador for going to fetch. Getting cranky at Dennis for losing concentration says an awful lot more about the person who got cranky than it ever did about brother Dennis. Regardless of what Dennis would do, whatever social faux pas he would make, you could never stay mad at him. And the reason you couldn't stay mad at him is because there was just an incredible truth that his heart was big and it was beautiful. As long as I've known Dennis, at the centre of his heart was Vicky. When anything would happen in his life, the one person he was at pains to want to tell was Vicky. And whatever it was that happened wasn't real until he'd had the chance to share that with Vicky. And even when Vicky was on the other side, literally, of the world, the only thing that mattered to him was sharing that story with Vicky. There was one RMA, so brother talked about the wedding, which of course happened in relative secret. And there was an RMA when I then was sitting, had some dinner with Vicky and Dennis, and they told me the news that they'd gotten married. So when I went home, with great joy, I shared this with my daughters. Now, as per the previous description, you'll probably recognise some of this. And so when I told my family that Dennis and Vicky had married, my daughters in unison said, well, that's about time. Because at the centre of his heart was Vicky. That the truth, Vicky, is that for you, for Dennis, you were his Southern Cross, the ever-dependable constellation that gives direction. And the fact that you were in company with him at the moment that he departed the world was, I'm certain, as close to heaven as any man could be. Cheers to our brother, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. And I now call upon Vicky Sheedy, Dennis's loving wife, to pay her tribute.
Hi everyone, and thanks for coming. I'm going to read this because it's the only way I'm going to get through it. And I'll probably get faster and faster. Dennis was always wary of speaking after Lewis. He said speeches after Lewis turned out tinny, tiny and trite. But here I am, sandwiched between Lewis and Jack Best, and it's all my fault. This is a tribute I didn't think I'd be making. My plan was for me to go first. Dennis was healthy and seemed bulletproof. I'd given up worrying about all those trips he made from Queenstown and St Helens, as he always turned up very early, but safe and sound even if he was tired. I loved the comings home. Dennis always made a playlist of music for us to listen to after dinner to celebrate. Originally a cassette tape and more recently a playlist. Music was a big passion for Pashen. His taste was broad, informed and inclusive. His knowledge of all types of music, sounds, tones, composition and history was legendary, and his obsession with guitars was scary. Chester's and Lewis have made the appropriate diagnosis, which will be revealed again in the song, Chester's song for Dennis. But Dennis made his own diagnosis. He suffered from gas. It's a guitar acquisition syndrome, and said best not to fight it. Music was a big passion for Pashen. Oh, I've done that. Frank Lowe's was a willing co-conspirator and fellow guitar bore. He buffed and tweaked the instruments to create the perfect sound. Dennis and Fred, my daughter's partner, also walked that path, speaking in a dialect capable of expressing the beauty and truth of the sounds that could be created from amplifiers, gadgets, thingies, Watsits and guitar bits. These discussions, experimentation and camaraderie were to form the basis of his transition to retirement. I recently found Dennis's to-do list for this year's trial retirement, which had number 1, learn to play and sing 20 guitar songs well. But retirement was something that never really happened. Dennis loved his craft. He loved working in teams with great nurses like Carol Fossing and Shannon in Queenstown, other doctors and health professionals. He was passionate about educating and learning from the new generation of doctors and insisted on working in practices that were actively involved in training medical and other students, interns and registrars. This was part of the Oakham model, and that's why Dennis worked for them when he was down here. Dennis was an ideas man. He saw the beauty in a great idea, and so did I, which is why we worked so well together. One such idea was the development of the role of rural generalist medicine to provide care for people who lived beyond access to face-to-face specialist services. The task of defining and developing systems to support the practice of this broad skill set, including the health system modifications, were big interests. He loved the full scope of practice that rural generalist medicine provide, but he also struggled with the frustrations of working in a system which did not work for many. Dennis explored solutions from a range of perspectives, academic, political and practical. He was the inaugural director of his much-loved Mount Isa Centre for Rural and Remote Health. It was a role he loved and excelled in, handing over to Professor Sabina Knight to take it to new heights. Dennis was the president of the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine and the Rural Doctors Association of Australia and Tasmania, working both the educational and political arms of the machine to provide access to better health care. His generous voluntary work with these organisations was recognised by his peers in various awards and an honorary doctorate from JCU, which is just as well because I found his PhD booklet and only had 1 page written in it. Dennis was a man of contradictions and paradoxes. He was the best person to sit next to in a boring meeting, unless you were chairing it. He was famously easily distracted and distracting. The quality of a teleconference was measured by the number of guitars he bought online. He was great fun to be with and had a brilliant sense of humour. But he was also someone who could follow through and do hard things. He could finish tough, unrewarding jobs. He was well known for his ability to undertake protracted on-call when it was required, and for his commitment to education and advocacy work in all its forms after he'd already worked a day's work. However, he was looking forward to retirement, and the first 6 months of 2024 was to be a practice run. Number 2 on Dennis's retirement list was go sailing, gentle with Vic, fast with Dan and careful with the kids. In 2019, Dennis and I bought a beautiful old wooden sailing boat, a Pilot House motor sailor, perfect for Tassie. Jeff and Jen Ayton and Paul Fitzgerald help us choose the right boat. She's beautiful and comfortable and safe. Her name's Andromeda. Dennis loved mucking around on her and fixing broken bits, often with the help of Paul. We joined the Kettering Boat Club and benefited from the help and good company that members provided. Dennis really loved sailing with my son Dan, who shared a similar obsession. They got to do the sailing that I wasn't up for. But we also planned family trips to take the grandkids and Harriet and Lou to Port Arthur and then to Maria Island. They loved adventures on the seas. Dennis and I spent some of our best times on that boat, in summer at anchor, lying outside, staring at the night sky. We were aware of how lucky we were. We talked about how fortunate we were to be living in this beautiful part of the world, as you can see. In a great community, visited frequently by family and other old friends, and it's so good to see you all here today. I'll never forget the incredible support offered by this rural community and my family when Dennis died so tragically. Joyce, Nadine and Caroline scraped Toby and I up from the jetty, took us home and looked after us. My daughter Kate and sister Kerry and son Dan arrived, and Geraldine soon after. And together with my good friend Danielle helped me through the horror of those first weeks. The Aytons were a constant support. Dennis was right. We were very lucky to end up here. Bye, Dennis. We love you all.
Thanks, Vicky, and certainly heartfelt support to you and your family in this trying times. As you look out, the beautiful day outside, you've got the sailing boats going past, which is the Bruny Island race happening today. So fitting that they put that on to acknowledge Dennis. Each year they do that. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Jack Best and his wife Janine, and we're both unfortunately unable to travel back to Tasmania from Sydney this week due to COVID-19, and with the wonderful support of Frank Meaney, One Vision, they've recorded a video tribute for Dr. Jack Best, is known to many of you. I had a call with him the other day. He describes himself as a distinguished person, old man, author, essayist, poet and blogger. Others would recall others were instrumental in developing the university departments of rural health, university rural clinical schools, and contributed with Professor Ronsky to the development of the James Cook University Medical School and subsequently Deakin University Medical Schools. He's a physician, researcher, activist, campaigned against nuclear testing on Muratoa Atoll, supported recognition of research scientists with the Tall Poppy campaign, and I thank Jack and Janine for their contribution today. A eulogy for an uncommon man.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jack Best, and I've been given the privilege of talking about this uncommon man, Dennis Pashen. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person because the fact that the dreaded lurgy has got me. So I apologise for not being here, but anyway, you know, when I heard Dennis had died, my first reaction was of disbelief. For a guy who epitomised life, this was heresy that Dennis was dead. Then it sank in, and when I heard the circumstances, yes, that was Dennis, dear impetuous Dennis. When I first met Dennis, he had not long left his general practice in Ingham. I found him somewhat of a shock. There was this bearded bloke with a loud voice confronting me. I don't remember exactly where, because his manner of greeting never changed, even after we became good friends. In Dennis, I found someone who called it how he saw it. He did not dissemble. He was an endless store of anecdotes. He loved company. His role often came across as a bit overwhelming, but underlying everything, there was a caring and generous person. But it was a guy always on the go, as though he had to cram as much as possible into his life. However, although I knew him, there was stuff about him I could not quite understand. Sometimes I detected a hesitancy in his bravado, as though there was an inherent shyness, and he needed a facade to cover this sensitivity. When he was in charge, this innate sensitivity was converted into the leadership quality few of us have, which made him a good leader because he was very, very aware of people around him and their aspirations. I just agreed with him on a few matters where his enthusiasm verged on the quixotic, but it did not interfere with our friendship. The most important person in his life was his partner, Vicky. She understood his foibles well, and she provided a degree of inner tranquility for him. I remember once visiting him in Mount Isa when he was in charge of the University Department of Rural Health. It was a weekend and he was alone with his dog. He was uncharacteristically quiet and it was easy to see he was depressed. That time there was no Vicky. Dennis remained silent despite our trying to cheer him up, and it was an awkward meeting. He would not admit he was missing Vicky, but fortunately he came to terms with his own need, and Vicky was always there for him. There are many other meetings, but as for others, as yourselves, to list his achievements, his awards, his employments, what he means to you. Nevertheless, there was one occasion which exemplified our friendship. One night we were forced to share a motel room in the outback Queensland town of Julia Creek. This caused great hilarity among the assembled throng. Of course, in the morning, there were mutual accusations of snoring, keeping the other awake. Actually, I'd slept well. I think Dennis did too. When Sue Moore and I conceived the University Departments of Rural Health and then the rural clinical schools, which Minister Wooldridge so importantly supported, they would not have got off the ground without people like Dennis, who love the bush and its people. Similarly, when we achieved the establishment of James Cook University Medical School, Dennis was one of those who was essential in providing the teaching role model of a bush doctor, one who could treat rollover victims and children with scabies equally. He had that ability to handle emergencies and deliver babies and understand the needs of the population and their health requirements. Dennis was really a child of Northern Australia, but when he moved to Tasmania with Vicky to picturesque Middleton overlooking the D'Entrecasteaux Channel opposite Bruny Island, Vicky and he looked after his mother Cleo until she passed away. It was a beautiful location. Dennis bought a boat and Vicky developed a magnificent garden. Dennis did not retire. He worked as a general practitioner all over Tasmania, including King Island, more than just filling in. He was attempting to build a coherent rural medical workforce. This was characteristic of his leadership qualities. We own a property on the West Coast, and Dennis was often working in Queenstown, and he dropped over to stay with us in Strawn on a couple of occasions, but he was always on the go, gone by 7 in the morning. The world had to be confronted, to be treated. He was revered on the West Coast, naturally. I suppose if Dennis was hearing this, I'm sure he'd have corrected me on some of the things I've just said. But before I could reply, he'd be off in a plume of car exhaust. Yep, that was Dennis. Yes, Dennis. I miss you, dear friend. We all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Best and Janine, and it's sad that you weren't able to be here in person, but the tribute was very fitting, and Dennis. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Chester Wilson, well known to many of you, recently retired after 35 years as a rural doctor and GP obstetrician in Charleville, Queensland. Larger-than-life band member of the Ned and the Kellys, Chester has written a tribute song to Dennis, and he'll be backed by Vicky's daughter's partner, Fred Noonan, drummer, musician extraordinaire.
You've all been standing up for a while. Just move around and get a bit of blood circulating again. The bar's open, says Vicky. Very important. ADHD, full of boundless energy, ab health, rural health, hospital or surgery, packed dog or rampant elephant, heart as big as farms, every social gaff you made forgiven readily. Proud of your air rifle, till you hit grandma on the bum. Hid under the house for a long time then, old son. Headed off to boarding school. Truant you would run. Still, you got marks good enough to study medicine. Amphetamines you tried from Dad's Vietnam collection. Long before every kid got labelled ADHD. Found them really helpful for your concentration. Retrospective diagnosis, clear for all to see. ADHD, full of boundless energy, ab health, rural health, hospital or surgery, packed dog or rampant elephant, heart as big as farms, rogue of a kid too early yet to see what you will be. Loved red wine and women from early on in student days. Nearly died while hanging by your hands up 3 stories. Struggled back to the balcony. A perilous dance. All the while, your drunken mates were hitting on your hands. Working with doctors. A wonderful communicator. Used French in discussions with administrators. That was when RT bought you a real French dictionary, told it as it was, without unnecessary embellishment. Ran big things triumphantly, for many a good cause. At the coroner's, a lawyer asked you a stupid question. You've never had the stupid questions from lawyers in your life, have you, fellas? 6 lawyers and the coroner, you stumped with erudition. They asked nothing more. After your lengthy diatribe, the high-sounding spiel, and little medical fact inside. ADHD, full of boundless energy, ab health, rural health, hospital or surgery, packed dog or rampant elephant, heart as big as farms, cut through nonsense like a knife, keen as you could be. Always encouraging, stimulating, interested, willing to help out at any time of day or night. Built relationships with people to make sure things got done. Bouncy as a digger. Mostly didn't need to fight. Loved music, loved playing. Even wrote some songs. Surely the best guitar collector in Australia. Enjoyed all kinds of music. Folk, country, jazz. For your music message group on Facebook, we all hail ya. The Centre for Rural and Remote Health in Mount Isa, a masterpiece. Whatever you touched. flourished and ran well. Salty water on the Dontracasto Channel took you from us. We're all missing you like hell. ADHD, full of boundless energy, app health, rural health, hospital or surgery, tact of a rampant elephant, heart as big as fireworks. Many of you journeyed in medicine, you saw clearly. What an incredible life you led, you and your darling Vicky. Thank you very much, Alan.
I'll now call upon Dr. Duncan Stewart to sing his song for Dennis. Duncan Stewart graduated from the University of Queensland in 1973 and has had a long career in patient safety and quality improvement. Now retired, Dr. Stewart will sing his tribute to Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I was one of three of us in the room today who graduated from the medical school with Dennis in 1973. And so we all scattered around the world, and so we haven't seen a lot of him, but I was fortunate to have several contacts with him over the intervening period. And the lesson I've learned from all this is never let a chance go by to reconnect with people that matter to you, and I missed a few of those chances. My tribute song is actually two half songs, and it's about supporting the bereaved. All the words said about Dennis, I could do no better than that. He's been paid a wonderful tribute by those preceding me. But this song's about us, those who are left, the bereaved who are sort of suffering in various degrees from the loss of Dennis. And it's the first song is one written by Willie Nelson, called About Getting Through.
When we lose the one we love, we think our world has ended. We think our world will be a waste of life without Dennis in it. We feel there's no way to go on. Life is just a sad, sad song. But love is bigger than us all. The end is not the end at all.
Here's the important line.
It's not something we'll get over, but it's something we'll get through. It's not ours to be taken. It's just a thing we get to do. Life goes on, and when it's gone, it lives in someone new. It's not something we'll get over, but it's something we'll get through.
Okay, that's a song I think is very supportive for us. Now, Dennis was a great fan of music of all types, but one of his major sources of pleasure was his philosophers, Monty Python. And Monty Python wrote this wonderful song, which Vicky tells me Dennis loved. And I want you all to sing along with this song. It's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, which all of you will know. The lyrics will be up here on the screen. But it's a song that is what I believe Dennis would want us to sing today. To move on, to get through this, and to look on the bright side of life and death. So let's go with that when you're ready. Some things in life are bad, they can really make you mad. Other things will make you just sort of curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And all together now. Always look on the right side of life. Sing along. Always look on the light side of life. When life seems really rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just laugh and smile and whistle, that's the thing. And always look on the right side of life. Always look on the right side of life. For life is quite absurd, and that's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your sin, the audience a grin. Enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow. And always look on the right side of death. Just before you take your terminal breath. Life's a piece of shit when you look at it. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, but laugh at it as you go. Remember that the last laugh is on you. One more time. Always look on the right side of life. Always look on the right side of life. So we'll finish it up there. Remember, that's the song that Dennis loved. When you're feeling a bit down, sing this song for Dennis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan Stewart, and the song for Dennis. This session is, we're going to ask for some tributes from all you wonderful people, some reflections on Dennis, his life well lived, and support for Vicky and their respective families. And it's probably a coats off session, so coats off, and with Dennis's Mambo original shirt, so coats off, and you know, some of those sayings that Dennis had, I'm sure will come out. I know one, you know, when I heard of what tragically happened, I thought Dennis would have said, "Oh shit, this is not good. This is not good." And but then his mind would have been going, as he did in medicine, to find the solution. He would be in that position. This is not good, and then and come to try and get a solution, which unfortunately meant he wasn't here today. So I call upon people in the audience to come up. You can come up, ideally come up and speak up here at this microphone. Otherwise, we've got the roving mic. Perhaps I could ask Dr. Marita Cowie to kick off. Marita is the founding CEO of the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine, and has long history with Professor Dennis Pashen, and I ask Marita to pass on her thoughts.
Thanks, Jeff. Like others, I've written a few notes because yeah, I've got a few thoughts to share. I think I've knew Dennis for 30 plus years. So there's lots of stories that we can tell later that probably won't be for the videotape. But I'm really grateful for the opportunity to pay tribute to Dennis Pashen, not only on behalf of myself and my family and Bob and Ziggy, but on behalf of the college for a great bloke. As was said earlier, Dennis was a Censor-in-Chief of ACRM and then later a President of the College of Rural and Remote Medicine. He helped us set new standards for quality and risk and safety in the delivery of rural medical care. And
I remember distinctly one meeting when he was still censor, where we met with the Queensland Registration Board and asked about international medical graduate assessment. And the answer was not a straight one. And I won't repeat the words Dennis said, but the registrar was left in no uncertain terms that that wasn't good enough. And of course the Bundaberg incident happened not long afterwards. So he had a very good instinct for doing the right thing, making sure that the quality of care in rural and remote was at least as good as we expect in the city. As president, he led the country in workforce, which has already been mentioned earlier today, not only in his sort of signature fields of rural generalist medicine and Aboriginal health, but also in health professions, nursing, ambulance, the paramedics, physician's assistants, again, all about making sure that country people could expect access to safe, quality care close to home. And it was really what drove him and his passion for all of the work that he did. His roles invariably took him in front of TV cameras, radio. He was a regular conference host and MC. Who could forget his quick thinking on the day that the then Queensland Health Minister had a meltdown where they tried to blame rural doctors for the rural doctor shortage in Queensland. I think those of us that might have been there still have sore jaws from how quickly they dropped in that session, but Dennis was ever the consummate host and managed to get us through that. He was the chair of many a meeting, and he had no great love of meetings. He famously referred to ACRM meetings as being either one or two bottlers, meaning how many reds he needed to get through. And he also hosted, back many years ago, some of the country's first live satellite broadcasts that brought education and training to people in remote and isolated settings. The bow ties, the sessions were live as they were broadcast, so they were always very nerve-wracking for the team that put it together. And share this story again for those that aren't aware of Vicky and Lex's putting on the auto cue message where he started to read it out and said how pleased that he was to speak on behalf of himself and his mother because it was his birthday. And he got it all out before the penny dropped of what he had just said. It was fabulous. There must be footage of it somewhere. It was just classic Dennis. He could cut through with politicians, communities, students. He could inspire. He was collaborative. He was a great leader. And he and Vicky pioneered inter-university collaboration, the FECking curriculum, the population health education curriculum for clinicians, lovingly called the FECking curriculum, because you have to have an acronym for everything that's good in medicine. The first systematic review for rural generalist medicine, I think, in the world, Vicky and Dennis led. And I've mentioned before risk frameworks about clinical practice in remote and rural settings. But mostly, though, he was a good bloke. He stood up and championed what he saw when he saw injustice. He was generous, caring. I really miss even his bad jokes, and there were many of those. His regular music recommendations. I even miss the thought of never having to call shotguns, so I didn't have to sit in the death seat, which was the front passenger seat when he was driving anywhere because it was so fast and so scary. Don't know who's going to call bullshit when he sees it in quite the same way Dennis did. He was able to do that, and as has already been said today, with great respect and great accuracy. Dennis brought energy and fun to the room. It was always better with him at the table, whether he was buying guitars or not. He excelled and lived a life for others. We are all better for knowing him. And we're grateful for the legacy he's left. We loved and still love you, Dennis. Vale Dennis.
Thanks, Marita. I took over the Akron presidency from Dennis Pashen. There was the Rural Medicine Australia Conference in Melbourne, that was when it was, and it was a hard act to follow. And then the subsequent outcomes of that meeting with the Dennis leading the dancing around the room. I always knew when Marita wandered to the back of the hall and out of scarce, that was probably the best time for a president to wisp away. Nothing good ever happens after midnight, as my mother said, but probably after 11 p.m. at an Akron conference. Professor Sabina Knight, Sabina, please. Sabina is Director of Central Queensland Centre for Rural and Remote Health, JCU Central Queensland Centre, Anton Breinel Research Centre for Health Systems Strengthening, and Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine. Sabina.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've known Dennis for probably as long as Marita. We were part of and for those of you who've been around, the early rural and remote health mafia, as we used to call it, the collective, the strong advocates for improving things in outback areas. And he was one of the rare folk who was really comfortable in his own skin and discipline and happy to collaborate with other disciplines, and always would make a tough gig a lot easier for all said reasons. Or difficult, the tough gig more difficult because he could outpace anybody with a bottle of red, and and there was always tomorrow. Dennis, I had the privilege of following Dennis to Mount Isa. It was his encouragement. He managed to get me at a moment when I was thinking about doing something different, and it was a delight to come and build on the extraordinary work that he'd done, building something from nothing with the team and the amazing people like Lewis and others that were there and who'd passed through that centre, and the support of the university. When you think about the influence he's had in building a health workforce in and for the region of medicine, nursing and allied health, it's been extraordinary, because together with that he was also chair of the Division of General Practice, and while he was chair, they built the first big comprehensive allied health workforce using Mars money, multidisciplinary workforce for the northwest Queensland and the Gulf out of Mount Isa, and that hadn't been done anywhere else. And it was an extraordinary model that worked incredibly well for quite some years. And he was very proud of it and very supportive and facilitatory of those of who did it. I know that the Kalkadoon mob and other folk of northwest Queensland are really feeling very sorry, in genuine mourning sorry about Dennis's passing, and are really sorry that they can't be here, and in their own way are planning to have something back at home. But the work that he did in building coalitions of the willing and the bending people to his will and others to make Mount Isa real was fantastic. He was a bloke who you could follow. He knew where the good coffee was in Canberra, early days when that was a critical piece of information. He was as happy in his jeans and boots as he was when he'd whack a suit on and go to a meeting that required that. He was also as equally happy and comfortable in collaborating with his fellow directors across the other UDRHs when they established the Desert Health Collaborative between Mount Isa, Alice Springs, Centre for Remote Health and Broken Hill. And that was a really productive relationship across the board. It was just a delight. As a personal friend, he's been a personal friend for a very long time, and the many lunches in the different towns where he's worked. He was a child and a bloke of Queensland and the bush, but it was after he retired from Queensland and came down here and started to do locums across the country that he finally got a look at other states and how they did things, and really appreciated the difference. I love going to the Kimberley and Pilbara, a little bit in the Territory, and then down here. and we've heard just how much he applied himself to taking up the challenges in Tasmania, but also at the same time doing it not just for medicine but across the board. And I know my nursing colleagues, remote area nursing colleagues who work down here as well as up in WA, really greatly appreciated the clinical support they got from him. He was, as everyone has said, he was a fabulous bloke. He was good fun, appropriately and always entirely irreverent, and I will always take that. Loved him dearly, and all I can think of is when I look out across there, and my immediate thought when I heard is that he would say, "Well, that went well," and mate, most of it did go well. There's just that last little bit, but yeah, you beat us all to the punch, and I'm still getting play recommendations on social media that I swear he's sending from somewhere else. And I just love that connection with music. It was great to have that shared from someone who was just had such a deep appreciation and love and networked into so many different sources of good music. Vale Dennis, love you dearly.
Is RT here? RT, Dr. Raymond Lewandowski is the Rural Generalist and President of the Rural Doctors Association of Australia.
Look, I didn't write anything down. I'll try to talk. I can say things about Dennis that you guys, everyone knows Dennis. We all love him. So I'm just going to share a couple of things. One of my earliest memories is riding in the suicide seat. You know, Dennis was my supervisor and mentor to become FACRM. And we would, the first trip ever between Kingaroy and Toowoomba, it's usually a long drive, unless you're with Dennis. And I was terrified to be with this guy who I knew was a great man. And we'd fly past these speed suggestion signs, and sometimes we'd be between the lines, and every once in a while he would look over to make sure we're still on the road, but usually he's looking at me talking. And that was terrifying, but oh my goodness, it was the most wonderful trip. And I've cherished the many trips now I got to make between Kingaroy and Toowoomba and Kingaroy and Brisbane. He was just loaded with wisdom and knowledge. He recruited us, a group of us at Kingaroy. He mentored us, pushed us, told us we could do things we didn't think were possible. We've created, in Queensland, we're called the Kingaroy Mafia now, and we're present everywhere in the leadership of the Rural Doctors, ACRM, a couple of universities, Queensland Health, all because of Dennis. But we, sorry guys. So I miss Dennis. The thing when we chatted about him, when we heard this terrible news, the thing we remembered about him, we shared stories, the Kingaroy group, and it wasn't, we knew he's a great man, and he was, and all these things he's accomplished are incredible, but that's not what we remember. We remember how much he touched us, how much he cared for us. And every one of us would see him now only once a year. I wish it was more. But he remembered everything. So he was the guy who heard you and then actually really listened and really cared. And anyway, I'm going to miss him. And Vale, Dennis.
Professor Wronski. Emeritus Professor Ian Wronski, AO, current Chair of Tropical Australian Academic Health Centre and previous DVC, James Cook University Medical School, and past President of VACRM.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. So lots have been said. I think I can beat most of you. I remember Dennis when he was in a general practice in Ingham with John Scott and Peter Tuxworth and someone else. And it was the beginnings of JCU's health and medical rollout. that sort of started in the early 90s and is still going. Because before then, JCU had no health or medical sector, believe it or not. So it's quite a big change. And the guys from Ingham all joined up. And we launched, I guess the flagship thing was the Master of Public Health and Tropical Medicine that was the largest in Australia within about 5 or 6 years. And I think it was a period of time where Dennis and his buddies were thinking about how do you generalise what they've all learnt in general practice, and they were in Ingham for a long time, and then get into the policy and director type population management thing. And I think from the early 90s onwards, it was sort of interesting for that practice because Dennis was really hungry to try to find ways of driving change around rural medicine. The others less so, although John Scott did. And he was always a larrikin, even as a postgrad student, right? But could read a room and knew how to marshal political arguments along with outrageous exaggerations to make a point. And so Jack Best at the time, who you saw on video, which is actually the best way of seeing Jack Best. But anyway, Janine is spectacular, but he'll probably hear about this. But Jack was working to try to think about, in his words, how do you establish intellectual capital in rural Australia? Because everything happened in metro centres up to the 90s. And there was talk about this and talk about that, and universities came and went, but never delivered. And Jack actually got into a lot of trouble with RDA for his first report, but then came and had a look at what was possible, and so began the conversion of Jack to the rural agenda over those 90s. He came up with the concept when Michael Woolridge had come as health minister. Jack was his senior advisor. Michael, who became a friend of mine, has an interesting take on working with Jack. What he says was, so 10% of the time, Jack's ideas were brilliant. It's just working out which 10%. And that was the test and try sort of environment of the 90s. We were all trying to work out what rural generalism hadn't become a construct yet. We had different words for it. We were fishing around. And Jack came up with the University Department of Rural Health concept as a way of building intellectual capital, which is his words, outside metropolitan cities. And one was, two were proposed. One at Broken Hill and one at Mount Isa. The Broken Hill one was sort of quite interesting because it's still going. And it was technically the first. The tricky bit, it was given to the University of Sydney. They were supposed to put the vet school out at Broken Hill as well. But then, when the government went to see what University of Sydney's plans were, they were actually going to put the UDRH at Camperdown. And so, which shows you the time, like that's what it was like. And then they changed the rules, so you had to put it at Broken Hill. You couldn't just put a University Department of Rural Health at Camperdown on your main campus. And the vet school wouldn't go anyway. Mount Isa was just a microsecond behind that, and I guess was the scene of another one of the great stoushes of South versus North about who was going to run the University Department of Rural Health in Mount Isa. And University of Queensland, I guess, had been the traditional University of Queensland rather than the University of Brisbane, which is what it is now. And that was dangerous. But, and JCU was emerging, hadn't yet established a medical school, but you could see the trend. And Jack had to negotiate UQ, JCU, Ken Donald, Ian Ronsky, and Dennis Pashen, who was trying to help JCU, but not look like it. So this went on for months, and eventually it was given to Queensland Health to run for a while, and then eventually went to JCU. So that was the first time, I was on the board of that for ages, and that was the first time, I think, anywhere in Australia, we saw someone put their intellect and vision into where you could take this thing that was written down on paper as a concept and an idea of establishing intellectual capital in rural areas and turn it into something. And I think the Dennis Pashen's work at the UDRH, the Mount Isa Centre for Rural Health, was probably the most important event around the establishment of remote health and how we were going to do that in the next 30 years and build on that. And that was really led by Dennis. He was always aware that a lot of this stuff had to be done by Indigenous people. And some of those people are now the directors of what was the Mount Isa Centre for Remote Health. Katrina Felton-Bush is. So, and that all started then. It was fostered by Sabina, who then went to Emerald, and Katrina's now running it. And you can see that some of these things are 20, 30-year strategies that play out over time. And Dennis had the capacity to see the vision, create enough political turmoil to get things moving, but be really aware of what you had to do on the ground to get there with a 10 or 20-year horizon. It's quite impressive. I think I also saw Dennis and Vicky team up, and what gets underplayed at funerals, I guess, or memorials, Vicky is also a visionary. And decades, certainly years, probably a decade or two before other organisations had gone online and worked out how you were going to develop qualifications and a workforce using online platforms, Vicky had laid down the ground rules. Years before anyone had, they'd thought about it, years before anyone had done it. And so Dennis and Vicky coming together must have been, I never visited them at home, it must have been amazing. Probably scary. Did you throw food? Yes. But it was an incredibly energetic and visionary team that evolved over time, moved from Queensland to Tassie, and actually has had a national impact, and in many areas an international impact. So it's really sad to see him go. Loved having him drinking rum on my balcony along with other people, which he quite liked to do too. We'll all miss him, but let's drink to his memory and the tremendous legacy he's left. Cheers. And I haven't even said the most embarrassing bit.
Thanks, Ian. Richard, did you want a word? And then please prepare any. I'll come around with the mic if you want to. Not happy to come up, but Professor Richard Murray, Dean of JCU Medical and Dental.
Thanks. Thanks. G'day, everyone. Look, it's hard to know quite how to approach this, because you can do the biography of people's work. You can sort of chalk up achievements, or you can try give paint a picture of the man, and it's all interconnected, I suppose. Distractible, always. Irreverent, unfailingly. Uncouth, often. Maybe, but that doesn't tell the whole story, because of course, as we've heard, a man of courage, with real kindness, I think, for people, who was deeply invested in the mission of making things better, never big-noted himself. He was the real deal. The real deal. Never mentioned it. And yet touched so many people. So, look, I think I first met him around the Wronski orbit, which is fairly wide, those who haven't fallen into it. And in probably about 2000 or so, when he was at the Mount Isa Centre for Remote Health, relatively new, and we were trying to do some things together whilst I was in the Kimberley. Ian was by that stage in northern Queensland around Aboriginal health worker training. Lewis, Katrina Felton Bush, Teresa O'Connor, Elizabeth Chalmers. We managed to create a partnership and a bunch of Kimberley Aboriginal health worker educators, sort of improbably when you think about it. Came across and helped to be doing, re-establishing really Aboriginal health worker training, and that was my first sort of stuff with him. We intersected, related to that, around physician assistants, and that was and like all of these things, this was the work you did together. I mean, the reality is you need more people to do more stuff on the ground, and so partly connected to the need to advance opportunities for Aboriginal health workers, but partly also to think about people like paramedics and others who might have expanded roles working with and alongside doctors, remote area nurses and others. So this, again, the big ideas is a real driver for that, but it resulted in human contact, see? So we spent time then doing that stuff, paramedic, advanced rural practice paramedics and so on as the proto-PA qualification. Dennis led that. We also went to the States to try and recruit and connect, and we spent a bit of time around the PA circles in the States. We travelled for about 3 weeks together in North America. Two things happened. We both became deeply sorrowful about the absence of dogs to pat. I remember one time with Ruth Borweg, who became another firm friend, also passed away sadly recently, but who was a champion of out of the University of Washington State, Seattle. One time we sat at I think the Professor of Family Medicine, who's passed away since, on his houseboat on the lake, and we had to fight over patting the dog. I mean, like it was. And of course, he was really missing people back home, Vicky, and so look, we had lots of those experiences together. Yes, I'll mention it. The one image that I have in my head of that trip is in Seattle, actually, at the aquarium, a beluga whale looming in the glass, not unlike here, really, about that height. Behind Dennis, a big male beluga whale, actually, with a big dongle coming out. And just as I looked over to Dennis, a great splush of cloud came out across his head, like a... And I just wish I'd had a camera. Oh my God. Anyway, so we had these sort of adventures as you do, and it was all about making a difference. And of course, the firm connections and the partnerships that were made out of these things. Ruth Borweg, the University of Washington curriculum, here, take it. And people, we'll help you with people. And so we did physician assistants, and that was good. Of course, I was also recruited at the time by him into the censor of the College of Remote Medicine, Australian College of Remote Medicine, ACRM. "Oh, it's easy, it's piss easy," he said. Here's a thumb drive, here's what we do. Look, just you do a couple of hours a week, nothing. Jesus, the scale of this work that I took on. And we did it together. Of course, I'd known Vicky separately. I'll come back to that, I'll be quick. Out of ACRM conferences, etc., when I was in the Kimberley. But that's when I really got to know Vicky. And I just echo Ronsky's observations about, here we're talking a person whose brain goes bzz, 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 bzz. Extraordinary passion and strategy and, energy and so on. And we just worked together then, and I came into that orbit around the both of them. Someone mentioned, I think, Marita, the AFCRI, don't you love the acronyms? Australian Centre for Primary Healthcare Innovation. We did a big systematic review, a 1-3-25 review. And Vicky did a lot of the background work, and various others, Bruce traded others involved. But we brought it all home one night, Vicky, in Kingston, with turning this big sort of magnum opus into something that could be handed in by 9 a.m. the following morning, in one of those stuffy Kingston hotels that are overheated with too much carpet and house dust mite, and did it, pulled an all-nighter. Ran to the RDA office, printed it, and got it over the line at 9 a.m. What a night, So look, many stories, presidency, other things. You always felt, you just ring him, and it was like it just picked up where you left off. I had less to do. One of my regrets is not actually spending time with the two of you. I'll close with this. Echoing others, I think, Vicky, you were very much the love of his life and his great hope. I think the two of you were a gorgeous sort of courtship over many years that culminated in a very beautiful thing for you both. I'm bitter that you were sort of cheated. He was cheated. I know he would have, as I think someone else has observed, as he was going down cursing and thinking, "Oh, bugger, I've left Vicky to clean up the mess, bugger." Again, so that's a very special part I knew of him, and my love to you, and farewell, dear friend. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard, and a beautiful note to pass over to Kerry, Vicky's sister.
Hello, I'm Vicky's sister, Kerry. We were very lucky to have Dennis as part of our family for so many years, and we loved I've left some notes at home, so I'm just going to make it up. We loved his humour and his generosity and good grace and irreverence. He brought so much to our family gatherings. I'm very grateful for that and to have had Dennis in our lives. Dennis was so generous, not in so many ways, not only financially. When we came here many times, whenever I'd come to Tassie, we'd come here to have lunch or dinner. And Dennis would always insist on paying, of course. And more recently, my three sons who are here today, and Alicia, Dennis, we had Easter here last year, and Dennis always insisted on paying for everything. But it wasn't just that, it was his generosity of spirit and humour and knowledge, his vast knowledge, and his Spotify list, which I'm still enjoying. But he was also so generous with his knowledge. I spent some time last year as a coroner, and I had no medical knowledge, so I would ring Dennis and he would steer me in the right direction or give me the information that I needed, which was so valued. I was also very grateful for Dennis's care to our mother, Mum, Joan, and but Dennis didn't hide his irreverence and his bluntness to Mum. And I remember very clearly, Mum was not happy when Vicky and Dennis decided to come down to Tassie and live, and she said to Dennis and Vicky, this was not supposed to happen. You were not supposed to leave until I died. And Dennis said to Mum, "Well, Joan, you didn't keep up your end of the bargain." So tough luck. but he he was that was Dennis. So we miss Dennis terribly, but we're most grateful really for Dennis's the joy and the love and the zest for life that he shared with Vicky, and that was so obvious whenever I was here with both of them. So we're very grateful for that. So rest in peace, my beautiful Dennis. Thank you.
So others who might want to say a few words?
So Richard Hayes, I'm another one of the Northern crew. So I know this isn't a competition, as at least somebody who's known Dennis for longer than me. But we first crossed paths in the early 80s, I think it was, when we were both GP obstetricians in North Queensland. And my first visual memory of Dennis, I'd spoken to him a lot before that, was he turned up at a meeting wearing the brightest yellow shorts I've ever seen, with a very multicoloured shirt. It actually did not go together very well in my view. But this was pretty good. It established a reputation to which he lived up for the rest of his life, and everybody just accepted it. And this is my sense of Dennis. I'm just going to talk about the personal stuff. We were both academics, but he's not this sort of academic who does research and writes papers. He's the sort of guy who comes up with the ideas and goes and sells it, and he was very good at that. For instance, I supervised his master's research project, and he decided he was going to make a video on how to do an ENT examination for rural docs, and he insisted on calling it up your nose, in your ear and down your throat, right? Spelt phonetically. And I don't think it's ever hit the top sales, but I do have 2 copies if anyone would like to have a look at it. It's a bit of a comedy routine. So Dennis, I like to think of him as the little boy who never grew up, or there's a boy inside every man, and that relates to Dennis. He certainly was challenging to work with at times because you just never knew what he was going to do next. I called him openly the professor of political correctness because he got away with it, and he got away with it because he used it as a strategic weapon. I remember somebody saying to me, the way to win an argument is you walk up to somebody and you punch them on the nose, and then you tell them what you want to tell them. And I think this was his way of verbally punching people on the nose, because I say he got away with saying things that the rest of the room would cringe and think, surely he's going to get the sack for that. But he never did. He actually generally won the argument. I'm still not too sure what I'm going to do, Vicky. He owes me a whole bunch of points. We're getting on board a BA flight from Heathrow to Winnipeg, I think, on a trip. And I said at the desk, oh, look, is there any upgrade to first class available? I've got lots and lots of points I can't use. And they said, sorry, sir, it's closed, too late for that. So I shrugged my shoulders, walked on, scanned my pass and sat down. I didn't see Dennis again. I thought, oh, that's strange. He got held up behind me. And then I thought, well, he's in another part of the plane, okay? So at about halfway over, I got up and wandered around thinking, where is this guy? And there he was in first class on his own, well into, I'd say, at least his first bottle of wine. He just waved at me. And later on he said, thanks for the upgrade. They thought I was you. So also I have to say that I don't think Dennis was in his 70s. I regard him as somebody who was at least 150 because he was able to be in 2 or 3 places, mentally if not physically, at once. Very hard to keep up with. And I think he had, long before J.K. Rowling came along, he learnt that spell which Hermione used to be in 2 classes at once. So you'd think he was there with you, but actually he was off somewhere else working. And so he crammed an awful lot more than numerical years into his life. And part of me wonders, this is classic denial, of course, has he used the spell again? When's he just going to turn up? Thanks, you'll be missed, Dennis.
Thanks, Richard. Dr. Ross Lamplugh? from Ochre Health and fellow of the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine.
Hi all, we've been going for a while and I'm sure you want to be here, so I'll disregard most of my stories that have already been told. Probably a couple that people might know, like one is Dennis walked into the office the other week and suggested there was a bit of damage to his front fence, and the girls drove past and his front fence was on its side, and obviously a motor vehicle had driven straight through the middle of it, and he denied it, but he never boasted about his driving skills ever again. He was a cheeky bugger who, changed Michelle's desk sign from boss lady to bossy lady, and again denied it. And no one else on the West Coast would have been brave enough to do that. So, and we were out at dinner one night, and my girls were there, and he ordered some chili fries at an African restaurant that were so hot he couldn't eat them. So he asked my girls, who were about 10, if they'd like some chips. They still haven't forgiven him about 8 years later. But look, I could tell a few other stories, but I won't because I'll move it on. But what I'd like to do is just read out a couple of things that that the team on the West Coast asked me to portray to you all, and they'd obviously love to be here. They loved him dearly. One is just a few of his lines. So the God hates me every time something went wrong. Is it for fuck's sake Friday yet? Which was apparently a weekly one. And even assholes get sick whenever he had a difficult patient come in. But they said, and quoting them word for word, they said, Dennis was larger than life, always happy, never angry or cranky. He loved a story if you had a few spare hours to listen. He was smart, funny, easygoing, and could swear like a sailor. And that's a big call for a West Coaster. What did Hamish and I probably want to say? We'd just like to say that I could probably count on one hand the seminal things that have happened in Ochre over the years that have helped to improve us. And Dennis starting to work with us about 10 years ago was undoubtedly one of those. There's no doubt that Ochre, we wouldn't be the organisation that we are today if it wasn't for the teachings he gave us about caring for patients and teaching students and mentoring others, being kind but strong. The advice that he gave me, usually helpful, sometimes at 2 a.m. The conversations that we had, occasionally about work, but more often about red wine or boats or woodworking or similar things. The bottom line, I suppose, is that that we really genuinely loved Dennis in Ochre, and he'll never be replaced. Thanks, Dennis.
Peter Rutherford, CEO of the Rural Doctors Association of Australia. Thanks, Peter.
I'm so short. That's so good. Anyway, so listening to all these amazing stories and reflections on Dennis, I can say I'm honoured that he was my friend, but he was also my work colleague. And I came across Dennis about just under 20 years ago with RG in Queensland when it kicked off. And even though I worked for Queensland Health and he was representing ACRM, somehow I always ended up with the jobs. So he was good at that. And then our paths crossed intermittently. And then I was given the opportunity to work in South Burnett. And Dennis was the DMS. And so our paths crossed again. And it was an honour. And he brought a vision to Kingaroy and turned Kingaroy into a bad news story, into a really good health news story. And I watched his leadership influence a cohort, as RT said, of the mafia, Kingaroy Mafia, you know, his leadership influenced them to be better doctors. And we often talk about RGs representing community need. And I watched him go, we've got a drug problem. And he sent all the doctors off to do training so we could set up a clinic. We had an issue with family planning and he did a huge amount of training. And he would go in, if he was on call, he'd go in at 9 o'clock and clear out the ED. And his leadership and knowledge, and that he passed that on to the next generation of doctors, was just inspirational. My job was to deal with the bureaucracy, because apparently Dennis didn't like that. So we got there, and it did. It turned Kingaroy and South Burnett into a real basket case, into a real success. And, you know, he made sure he succession planned and he handed over to RT, and we are also proud of the team that we had there. And then I got the job at RDAA, and I rang Dennis and I spoke with Dennis, and I've spoken with Vicky and Dennis at different times, and they welcomed me into their home down here. But he also was very clear to watch out for the wankers, and he gave me a list of names. and you know, his advice and his guidance throughout nearly 20 years of working in rural medicine has been absolutely the best thing ever. And I value his friendship, I value Vicky's friendship, their guidance and their mentorship, and we love him.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah. Dr. Ruth Stewart, National Rural Health Commissioner.
Yeah, so Dennis was a mate who I loved and you loved. There's been lots of great stories about the man, about his huge heart, his amazing innovation and drive and leadership. But I've got a theory that I want to share with you, and that's why I've got up now, because I watched Dennis and his mother together, and I went, now I understand. I reckon when Dennis was a little boy, he learnt very early on that all he had to do was look at his mum, do something funny, smile, and he got away with murder. And having learnt that lesson very well, he carried on throughout life with it to our benefit. Thank you.
Others, some of the Middleton folk or locals here, or any others? I've got a mic down here so I can bring down.
Hello, I'm Michael Brown. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know Dennis better, but I'm a sailor and a philosopher, and I actually spoke to Dennis on the day that he died. And it's been said that he was uncouth occasionally. I think couthness is the privilege of the people who don't care to change the world. So I want to say about Dennis, fuck!
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Connor, and I just wanted to talk about the mentorship that Dennis did. I first met him in '98 in Townsville when he was the chair of the Division of General Practice, and I was working in the emergency department. And when I went to Richmond in 1999, not the one in Tasmania, the real one in Queensland, the warm one, Dennis was probably one of those few mentors who actually came, saw me, dropped in and made sure that I was okay and gave me a lot of support. And for the 7 years I was in Richmond, I could always rely on Dennis. We didn't agree on everything, but we agreed on two very important things. One, our love of dogs, and two, that the only way to get rural medicine fixed was to grow our own and to grow our own workforce. And that's what we did. And Dennis would often, who's in a hurry between Townsville and Mount Isa, he'd pop in, but not to see me, but to see Millie, the pig dog that we'd rescued. 45 kilo, really growling, aggressive thing who loved Dennis. She absolutely loved him. And I said to him, you know, you've got to stop stopping and patting my dog, get your own. And that's when Zach came on the scene in Mount Isa. And then I went to Cloncurry and spent 12 years there. We had 24 registrars, Chris, my partner, and I. And Dennis was the sort of person, if we were short-staffed or there was a problem and he was working at Micro, he would actually come and see patients. There's a lot of people who do a lot of talking about fixing rural health. Dennis didn't just talk, he did the walk as well. And Vicky, we just had the best times together. The four of us, we really did. And just one last thing, and Millie. And just one last thing, when Sabina was taking over from Dennis at Mount Isa, I was a bit reticent about this. I'm thinking, how could he ever be replaced? So he brought Sabina to meet me, and we had one of our favourite, well, famous barbecues / South African braais in the backyard. And Sabina was like, is this going to ever end? It was about 3 in the morning when it ended, because luckily I trained up someone to cover me that night. So I just want to say I loved Dennis very much and I really respected him, and I was very, very sad to hear that. And love you too, Vicky. We both do.
Thanks, Jeff. My name's Graham Exelby, and I was lucky enough to start doing things with Dennis in the late 60s. We were both at med school. 69 was a really interesting year. There was Woodstock, there was Dennis Pashen, there was Inagata Davida, and I can remember after meeting him taking me to this bloody awful party where they played Inagata Davida over and over, and they were all sitting around high as kites, but we won't go there. We spent a lot of time together. I think the first car he trashed was coming home from a function at my house, the Renault 10. I don't know if anyone will ever remember what they were like, but they were bloody awful cars, rear-wheel drive, and if you drove them like Dennis did, well, you're always going to crash them. In the, what year was it? 72, we spent a very formative 6 to 8 weeks in an obstetrics term, living in the top of the Royal Women's Hospital, playing music constantly. I don't know if we actually saw any patients, but that was the beginning of a long time friendship. I remember driving to Ingham from Mount Isa just so that we could listen and play this new musician he'd discovered, Jimmy Buffett, who sadly passed last year as well. But we've kept in touch, not as often as I would like. My last time down here with Dennis and Vicky, I just went ooh and ah at his guitar collection and asked my wife if I could build a similar one, and the answer unfortunately was no. But Dennis was great for me. I've moved out of general practice into research. He's encouraged me, and the last contact he had with me was keep going, boy. To Dennis.
Open mic.
Oh, I wasn't going to do this. I'm from very early in the piece, very late in the piece, because of my friendship with Vicky and then with Dennis. And what that friendship was about was their life down here. And it involved dogs and music and food and friendship and advice, because he always wanted to help with other people. I loved his advice. When I was seriously worried about my health and I'd come to him, he'd go, well, you're not dead yet. You don't look dead to me. And I'd be going, I'm really worried. I'm really frightened. Don't worry. until it happens. And it happened to you, for me, or anyone else. And I'm so sorry for that, and I know you're annoyed with that. But what you've left me is a great friend and a beautiful community to be part of. And so, Dennis, we are never going to forget you, and we are always going to celebrate you. Thank you all.
Just to add to the couple of Dennisisms and the legacies left behind, who would forget the conference series he started at Mount Isa, Naked and Clueless? Yeah. Great on your CV as a keynote speaker. But then to be followed by Are You Remotely Interested, which lives on.
And I think he was a great supporter of the Young Conformity Festival out at Queenstown too, so for all those out at Queenstown. Had someone else? Lucy.
Hi everyone. I'd firstly just like to acknowledge country and acknowledge the Aboriginal people of whose land it is today. I'm Lucy Walters and I'm 3AD. That means 3 after Dennis in the list of fabulous presidents of ACRM. And I remember the first board meeting that I was at when, which was a spicy one actually, when Jeff became president, but we had a dinner after the board meeting and we were walking home through the park and I was a little overwhelmed. You know, there was a bunch of larger-than-life blokes who were, you know, the powerhouse of rural medicine who I was in awe of, that were, you know, well handled by Marita, thank goodness. But, you know, I remember particularly at that time there was, you know, Jeff being, you know, very considered, Richard with a lot of, you know, plans for the future, and Dennis just completely cutting through the bullshit with so many swear words, and me thinking, okay, I think I'm all right here. I think I have, you know, I can do somewhere in the middle of this bunch. But I remember him also when I became president of ACRM, which was not something that I had ever planned to do or imagined to do, but you know, Dennis and David Campbell and Richard Murray and you know, the group of people who are the presidents of ACRM, you know, really called me to account and said, you know, if I was serious about wanting to help shape rural medicine, well, we needed to have women that were in this role as well as the hairy, you know, white bastards that had the role prior to that. And, you know, you could ring Dennis with a problem and he would have 3 random ideas, but then he would listen, care and have really sage advice. And so you know, I feel puzzled by Dennis. I feel puzzled by, you know, the larrikinism and the, you know, devil may care aspect of him, but also, you know, his integrity and his care, and I miss him and I send my love.
Lucy. John Hall.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Last time I was with Dennis was here. He's my second great mate to pass on Bruny Island, unfortunately. My best mate from school passed on Cloudy Bay about 15 years ago. He was an absolute mentor for me. He was an inspiration. My cohort of rural generalists looked up to people like Dennis and we wanted to be him. He was just so inspirational. When I worked for Oka Health, I spent a lot more time with Dennis and came down here. I also had the privilege of presenting Dennis the Legend of the Bush Award when I was the RDAQ president. And the first time I met Dennis, I've only known him for about 20 years, not like everybody else, but the first time I met Dennis was in the corridors of Akram, and I was walking in, sort of introducing, like finding my way, finding where everyone was, walking up the corridor, and this guy comes bounding down the hallway at me, and I'd never met him before, and he goes, "Hey, I'm Dennis Pashen, who the fuck are you?" So that actually happened, and he's always called it straight for me. Like, he's just always, like, the other things he said to me is, like, when I moved from Stanthorpe, which is 3.5 hours west of Brisbane, to a town called Oakey, which is only 2 hours west of Brisbane, he told me that I was boutique rural. And then the last thing he actually said to me was, like, I've just gotten to that age where I can actually grow facial hair. And I was trying to, like, emulate all the grey beards of rural medicine. And he said to me at RMA, "Mate, it's not going to increase your credibility, don't worry, don't try." Anyway, when I was working with Ochre, I had the absolute privilege of spending time with him. I stayed with the guys and Vicky in Middleton, and it was amazing. I stayed with him over at Queenstown. I used to work over there with him. I don't know if people have seen the soft side of Dennis, but I woke up one morning, like, I was staying in the same, like, doctor share house, and I get out and he's like, breakfast is made. He'd put out the breakfast. He'd, like, muesli, orange juice is there. No fanfare, no nothing. This guy that actually cared about people. And then spending time with Vicky and Dennis in Middleton, walking into their home felt like just a big warm hug. The love was palpable, and the connection between you guys was amazing, and it really touched me, and I'm going to miss him, and yeah, all the best to you, Vicky, and everyone. Valet Dennis.
Thanks, John. Frank Lowe's is a good friend of Dennis, a patient from Queenstown on the west coast of Tasmania. He's an instrument maker, musician and repairer, trained by Master Luthier Chris Kinman, and he's a retired... And he's been told many lies by Dennis, but he also was a co-conspirator in the greatest guitar collection in Tasmania and maybe Australia.
Dennis and I were both parrot heads. You have to look that up. Bit of fun. Mother Ocean, I have heard you call. Wanted to sail upon your waters since I was 3 feet tall. You had it all. Had it all. Watch the men who rode you switch from sails to steam. In your belly you have found treasures I have seen, most of them small, most of them small. Yes, I am a pirate, 200 years too late. The cannons don't thunder, there's nothing to plunder. I'm an over 40 victim of fate, feeling so small, feeling so small. I've done a bit of smuggling, I've run my share of grass, made enough money to buy Miami, but drifted away so fast, never meant to last, never meant to last. I have been drunk now for over 3 weeks, passed out, fell down and sprung a few leaks. I gotta stop fishing, gotta stop wishing, down to rock bottom again. Feels like the end, feels like the end. I go for younger women, live with some for a while. Oh, I'll throw them away, they'll come back one day. Maybe I'll gather a smile, maybe that's fine, maybe that's fine. Mother, Mother Ocean, after all these years I found my occupational habits, my occupation's just not around. Feel like I'm down, gonna head uptown. Feel like I'm down. I'd just like to ask you to give yourselves a round of applause, because Dennis is all about you guys, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Nibbling on sponge cake, watching the sun bake. All those tourists, they're covered with oil. I'm on my front porch swing, strumming my six string. Spill those shrimp, they're beginning to boil. Wasting away again in Margaritaville, searching for my lost shaker of salt. Some people claim that there's a woman to blame, but I know it's nobody's fault. Don't know the reason, stayed here all season. Nothing to show but this brand new tattoo. Hey, it's a real beauty, Mexican cutie. How it got there, well, I haven't a clue. Wasting away again in Margaritaville, searching for my lost shaker of salt. Some people claim that there's a woman to blame, but I know, well, it could be my fault. blew out my flip-flop, stepped on a pop top, cut my heel, I cruised on back home. But there's booze in the blender, and I guess it will render this frozen concoction that makes me hang on. Wasted away again in Margaritaville, searching for my lost shaker song. One people claim that there's a woman to blame. I know, I guess that's my fault. Yes, I know. My friend.
I'll call upon Dan Sheedy to Vicky's son to pay his tribute and a farewell. And whilst we're doing that, Chester and Fred will get ready, and I want all to participate in singing a few choruses of Chester's song for Dennis.
Cheers, Jeff. Thanks, mate. Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Sheedy. I'm Vicky's son, Dennis's stepson. So I really privileged my opportunity to speak to you all today. Dennis has impacted our family, and that impact is truly treasured. And I'm going to keep it brief because, I'm not going to be able to keep it together much longer. So my family, my sister Caitlin, her partner Fred, mum's sisters, Kerry, Geraldine, Jackie. We all have a shared experience of grieving Dennis. And that's complicated, right? It's complicated because, we worry about all these things, there's the logistics, the future, the what ifs and the if onlys. But, I also had the deep misfortune of having to break the news to my two young daughters. And their grief was just pure and simple. There was no complication. It was the grief of losing someone so loving, so funny, so larger than life, and the knowledge was immediate, and their understanding complete that this person would never be there. When they woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and needed a bowl of porridge and a bit of honey and to discuss what they were going to do that day. And I think their grief best illustrates what I feel, what is lost, but also what is to be celebrated today, which has been so well described about, Dennis and his impact, but just a huge hole in our family and in the community, and we will all miss him terribly. But thank you very much for all coming, for making the trip down or the trip across the road. We all really, really appreciate it, and this will be something we remember forever, and this will be part of Dennis's legacy. Thank you.
Now I can give you a little of the explanation. This song was written as a song, not as a poem, originally. But when I recorded it and sent it off to all of these blokes, I got the reply, "We can't understand a bloody word of it. Do it," and one of my mates said, "Do it as a poem and do it with a chorus." And that seemed to work okay. But now I'm going to make you guys work for your living. I'm going to make Fred work for his living too, and he doesn't know why either. I'm going to actually try singing it as it was originally intended, and you guys are very welcome. In fact, I would say please. Or,
there goes the rehearsal.
Or die if you don't. I want you to join in the chorus. Okay? That's the important bit. ADHD, full of boundless energy, ab health, rural health, hospital or surgery, tacked on a rampant elephant, heart as big as far laps, every social gaff you made forgiven readily. Proud of your air rifle till you hit grandma on the bum, hid under the house for a long time then not son, headed off for boarding school, true and you would run, still your marks got boogered enough to spooky medicine. Amphetamines you tried from Dad's Vietnam collection, thought before any kid was terminal ADHD, found them really helpful for your concentration, retrospective diagnosis dear for all to see. Join in. ADHD, full of boundless energy, and health, rural health, hospital or surgery, tacked on a rampant elephant, heart as big as far laps, rogue and alert too early yet to see what you will be. Love and rhyming women early on from student days, nearly died when hanging by your hands up 3 stories, struggled back onto the balcony, a perilous dance, all the while your drunken mates were hitting on your hands. Working with doctors, a wonderful communicator, used French in discussions with administration. Thanks again, RT, for that French dictionary. Right. Told it as it was without unnecessary embellishment, rendering things triumphantly for many a good cause. And the coroner's a lawyer asked you a stupid question. 6 lawyers and the coroner, you stumped with their addition. They asked nothing more after your lengthy diatribe, though your high-sounding spiel had little medical fact inside. Okay, ready everyone? ADHD, full of boundless energy, bad health, rural health, hospital or surgery, packed of a rampant elephant, heart as big as far laps, cut through nonsense like a knife.
Oh, the carnage. I'm on my own here, help me out.
I'm going to try and do something to explain what I do. Right. Oh, listen, I know I'm getting... I know I'm over 70 now and it should stand up by itself, but you can't have everything, can you? At the coroner's, a lawyer asked you a stupid question. 6 lawyers at the coroner, you stuck with their emotion. They asked nothing more after your lengthy diatribe, where your high-sounding spiel had little medical fact inside. Join in. ADHD, full of energy, and health, rural health, hospital or surgery, packed of a rampant elephant, heart as big as far laps, cut through nonsense like a knife, keen as you could be. Always encouraging, stimulating, interested, willing to help out at any time of day or night, built relationships with people to make sure things got done, bouncy as a deer, mostly didn't need to fight. for there you touch, flourished and run well. A bit of salty water on the Doncaster Channel took you from us, we're all missing you, my girl. ADHD, full of madness, energy, and health, rural health, hospital or surgery, back to the rampant elephant, heart as big as farmlands, many future needs in medicine, you saw clearly. What an incredible life you live, you and your darling King. You did very well, thank you. We've never sung it like that before, as you can tell, but you did very well, thank you.